All right. Well, since we just heard from Nikki about somebody else's story, I think Steve was going to talk about Nikki's story.
Yes.
Well, I think it was your story, but you mentioned me.
Well, as I've told Bob before, I don't have an original thought in my head, so I only get by plugging in on other people's story. No, so
Not
I was
true.
I was interested in looking back at the Monroe County Bar Association and the Avatar Conference, and what I was particularly interested in, that was as Nikki knows, and so well,
In our starring role in that.
in our starring role. But the conference was a solo and small firm annual meeting, and so I was curious about that because whenever you start talking about an Avatar conference, even in the legal tech world, people are kind of like, I don't know, that sounds kind of nerdy, and we all joke about it. I mean, you guys kid Nikki and I like, that is crazy too. Avatar people, what are they, and so I was really interested in what did the Monroe County solo and small firm lawyers think of this. So I talked to Kevin Ryan, who's the executive director, and somewhat to my surprise, he said they loved it. They loved it. They thought it was great. In fact, it was almost life-changing or career-changing to some of them. And he went on to tell me that these were not the most. Many of these people were not the most computer literate lawyers. And this is in Rochester, New York, for everybody's background. And some of the lawyers he least expected to like this liked it the most. I mean, it was really quite eye-opening. And I said, well, was there grumbling ahead of time? And he said, no, not really. And there wasn't any complaining afterwards. It was all kind of complimentary, and people just thought it was a great way to have a conference. And so it struck me that maybe the conference industry has been a little bit too hesitant to adopt this kind of approach for conferences, for fear that it just looked too strange. Very few problems in downloading the software, which also sort of surprised me because the first time I did it, it took a couple of clicks. And so, I asked him, I said, well, what do you think if we come out of the pandemic and we start having live conferences, what do you think about this? And he and I both sort of concluded that this is not, the avatars don't work for hybrid conferences. I mean, it just doesn't you're either all avatars or you're none of you are, and it doesn't fit. But for a lot of conferences, particularly as Kevin identified, state bar associations, for example, who have members spread out through a large state. I mean, Kentucky's not the largest state, but it's a long state, and people are pretty spread out. And it could be a good way for diverse geographical people to come together and have a good time. I mean, I love both those conferences, that the EDRM one and the Monroe County Bar one. It just was so much more natural. And so I hope as we go forward, Nikki and I both hope that everybody will vote for avatars.
And thanks so much for writing about that and the Bar Association doing that. I really appreciated your doing that and taking an interest in it and reaching out to Kevin too. So thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome. I was glad you were gracious enough to let me plug in on behind your story. I just, I think it's got a place. And, in the future, whenever somebody says, I don't think that's viable for us, I'm going to say, well, look, if the Monroe County Bar Association, a bunch of solo and small firm lawyers can do it and like it, we can all do it. And I don't mean that is insulting to the Monroe County Bar Association at all.
No, I think that's really interesting. I like the Avatar conferences. I've enjoyed them, but I've always thought it's going to be a hurdle to get, just sort of regular non-techie lawyers to engage in these kinds of conferences. So, and I think probably Nikki would even tell you that leading up to the Monroe event, she was kind of wondering how it was going to play out and what would happen. So it's great to hear that it
Yeah.
went well and that people engaged with it and liked it. Hopefully we don't have to be spending too much more time talking about virtual conferences, though. I'm looking forward to the face-to-face ones going forward. I know we're all talking about hybrid conferences, but I took Joe's tip and booked my cheap hotel room in Vegas already, like $30 a night or something.
It's unreal. It's unreal how cheap it is right now.
I need to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I did the
Right.
upgrade and it was still like only 35 or something like that. It's nuts.
Yeah.
And in all fairness, regarding our event, I think that there were some lawyers that probably did not sign up for the conference that otherwise would have attended because of the avatars. But there were also some lawyers there that were not the most tech savvy. That kind of surprised me that they were there. That once they committed to it and dove in, they enjoyed it. But I definitely think that it did affect attendance numbers a bit, and so the people that just weren't willing to give it a try just didn't give it a try. So
Yeah,
in all fairness, there's both sides of that.
Kevin and I talked about that a little bit, and he like you, Nikki, it's hard to know why people didn't attend. I mean, it's, Kevin sort of said, it's been a hard year for solo and small firm lawyers, which is true. And, whether that contributed to, lower attendance, who knows? But yeah, I mean, obviously some people may have turned their nose up at it. It would be interesting to see if they had the opportunity to do it again next year, which will probably be live next year, but whether more people will come in because people say, well, this is really a lot of fun.